Good morning, and welcome to Zen with a Smile. And a chuckle. And a chuckle. Yesterday, I mentioned that I might be a curmudgeon. Curmudgeon. A grumpy old man. But I think I've left that in the past. Patience, I talked about yesterday, the growth of patience. Curmudgeon. Anyway, I need one of those dictionaries that is audio, so I can hear them pronounce words. Because unfortunately, like most of us, my reading and writing vocabulary is much larger than my spoken, which is something that I'm working on changing, trying to incorporate more precise language orally. Okay, and this is part of a process. Cognition. Cognition is the mental action or process to acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experiences, and the senses. And I think the emphasis should be on the senses. Cognition is what we take away from the world around us, that we experience and then think about. So made available through our senses. And as I'm inclined to do, I talk a lot about the mental processes and its usefulness. In fact, we wouldn't be much without it. So this cognitive or cognition process is ongoing, especially if we work at continual growth. I said before, and I'll say again, my daily mantra, my personal mantra, is that I'm a better man today than I was yesterday. And I'll be a better man tomorrow than I have been today. This just gets me focused. A lifelong process. Because I'm open this way, it's always been a challenge to bring it back this way, to focus. So thus you can see the extremes again that I've talked about. And my mantra keeps me focused. And it's all predicated on forgiveness. Perhaps the most neglected or forgotten forgiveness of them all is our forgiveness of ourselves. Any transgressions, mistakes, setbacks. We need to acknowledge them, learn from them, but ultimately we need to embrace ourselves with forgiveness. So this lifelong process of cognitive learning, observation, experience is made possible through our mind. So I've mentioned before not wanting to abandon this tool to somehow conquer it or subjugate it, relegate it to second-class status in the pursuit of clarity, that somewhat elusive state of mind, at least for me. But instead of subjugating, conquering, defeating, silencing the mind, I'm going to suggest that it too can evolve from cognition to cogitating. Now, cogitating is to ponder on or to meditate on intensely. So I see this as an evolution of the mind, that the mind can grow. The cogitating process, the meditative process, the meditative state. Now, without the foundation of cognition, experience, sensual perceptions, cogitating has no soil, no fertile soil in which to blossom, expand, grow, blossom, flower, and bear fruit. My second attempt at the 4 yogas, which suited me best, as I've mentioned, Raja, the royal, so-called royal path, that for me included unsustainable deprivations, discipline. As my teacher at that time told me, meditation is like a battle. If you're not sweating, if you're not putting tremendous amounts of energy in this process, he would argue that it's not meditation at all. This was exemplified in my experience from Rinzai Zen, the Zen of the samurai, where your martial art combined with the discipline of Cha Dao, the tea ceremony, and Ikebana, flower arranging, very specific, orderly processes done with full mindfulness. And I took away from this somewhat militant expression of Zen, if you will, my ability and my grounding in what my Roshi called Zen walking, careful, mindful. Getting in the rhythm of things. Being so much in the flow of how things progressed that in a crowd, you could walk through a crowd, parting the crowd as you walk through without being noticed, because you have reduced yourself down to the lowest common denominator of the rhythm of life. Most people just, if they're even aware of it, they basically take it for granted. So this, through training, can be a part of your being. Getting in the rhythm of things, not attracting attention, parting the waters as you stroll through unmolested, unrecognized, as if you indeed are the invisible man or woman, invisible person. So the rigor no longer suited me. Worried so much about form, sitting straight, form over function, not moving a muscle for hours at a time in, for me always, very uncomfortable, unnatural postures. Letting all that go probably could represent my finally letting go as cognition as the driving force in my mental life to cogitating. Not so interested in simple accumulation, absorbing through the senses, gaining through experience. Cogitating meant that ample cognition had taken place. I had my mental vocabulary. Now I needed to ponder. And believe me, pondering has always been a part of my life. And pondering to me means that you transcend your reliance on both sensual input and experiential experience. Experiential. A little tongue-tied this morning. But what I mean is that no longer solely rely on experience or input from the outside. Pondering means to me to consider all the external internally. And we do, after all, absorb and bring this sensory input, this process of information to knowledge. The next step being is cogitating. Cogitating transforms knowledge. It's the process of transforming knowledge to ultimately to wisdom. And wisdom is the goal of jhana yoga. Wisdom to listen. Wisdom to witness. Wisdom gained by reading the words of saints, both past and present, of studying the Dharma or Dharmas, because it's possible that there's more than one truth. Ultimately, there's one. But as long as you're entertaining your ego, as long as you're trapped in the egoic structure, truth can be seen in plurals. Multiple truths, equally so. And this is where the different paths come in. You can reach the peak through a multiple of paths. Each path perhaps promising its own truth. And it's only upon reaching the pinnacle that two things happen. The first is that you reconcile the differences of all the truths. Yes, multiple truths, equally so. Unite without conflict into the ultimate truth, the singular, finally, from multiple to singular. This is the path of surviving duality, piercing the veil of duality to see the beauty and the completeness of the non-dual reality. But that's one thing, okay? Reconciling many truths, many paths that ultimately lead to the same place with the same condition of wholeness. Separation and division is necessarily left behind. And the other part, the other thing that reaches you, that occurs, other than this reconciliation, this acceptance of this aha moment, when apparent duality morphs into non-duality seamlessly. The other thing that happens when you reach the pinnacle is you get your first glimpse of all the pinnacles, or not all, because there's an infinite amount of pinnacles, but enough that you see. It's humbling. You thought I reached the top, when indeed you saw that there's many more mountains to climb. No matter how high you think you've reached in your spiritual pursuit, there's an infinite amount to come. But all this should do is, it should not discourage you. It should not put you off on the pursuit. It should humble you, And no matter how great you thought your accomplishments were, they're very, very minute in the rhythm of the real. Now, some saints, some masters, some Buddhas willingly choose to remain at the first pinnacle and not only remain but walk back down into the valleys to give other beings a hand up. And this is indeed the most selfless work of bodhisattvas, to not continue their personal journey until they've done everything within their power to give a hand up to those souls struggling at many times, in many cases, struggling to find the next step in their personal journey. I mentioned that our role as individuals in our personal spiritual journeys is paramount. It's through our efforts. While I can't dismiss that a master could touch me and awaken me, I can't dismiss this. But I do believe that the master simply points the way, reminds us of what's possible, invites us to hear the song of the universe, takes us to the edge of the precipice, and says, if he says anything, it's jump. Now that leap of faith is solely ours. No one pushes you off the precipice. You have to willingly jump into the unknown and ultimately unknowable. And it's through cogitating, through meditation, through pondering that you learn to deal with perhaps the biggest obstacle is fear. Imagine facing a precipice and only clouds below, no idea of how tall or how far you will fall. When you do plunge, when you do willingly leap, and this fear of the unknown. But the fear of the unknown is ultimately, for most of us, couched in the fear of death. Because what happens after death is unknowable to the living. But once you see the unity, once you see the pervasive, once you feel the embrace, once you listen to the song of the universe with its infinite compassion, infinite wisdom, and see that life as a circle from birth to death. I've always wondered, basically most cultures celebrate your day of birth. I've really wondered why there isn't an equal celebration of death. Why don't we have death days? instead of just birthdays, because we do. Where there's a birth, there will eventually be a death. And instead of fearing this, we start to find comfort that we indeed can't be other than participants in the wheel of life. And when you start looking that we're in a circular pattern, much as the moon circles Earth, so too as a solar system, as a universe, as a galaxy, the Milky Way, we're not only circling, but we're spiraling. So at some point, you learn just to enjoy the ride. It's as if you're a passenger in a vehicle, witnessing, looking out the window. You aren't driving, so you can't determine direction. You can't determine scenery. You can't determine or influence what's out there. So you can either fret about the seeming lack of control, or you could sit back and just enjoy the ride. This is a witness. This is the part of you that you should cherish, develop, support, listen. Listen to your witness. As I've mentioned before, my witness has always been silent, distinguishing it from what we call conscious. Conscience, not conscience, that little voice inside that's telling us if we did right or wrong. That's a presence, but it's on the hierarchy, a step below the silent witness. So this is in the rhythm of things. Cognition, gathering, analyzing, data, processing, until it's time to focus on cogitating. Cogitating, for me, was building systems. I've always been a systematic man. I've always been interested in not only constructing systems, but deconstructing, putting them together, taking them apart. INFJs, the personality type, one of our favorite pastimes. And building these systems into our web of connectedness, a web that quickly allows us, a library, as I'd mentioned, a librarian that can effectively locate all this stored cognition so that we can use it when we need it. And once we've accumulated enough, it becomes subconscious. It's always been both conscious and subconscious. But subconscious takes the burden, takes over. The conscious mind is able to expand. This is where cogitating, meditation, pondering finds its time and place. So, cognition, cognitive skills are with you from birth to death if you're doing things correctly. Unfortunately, many of us, as we get older, we refuse to learn. To learn anything new. You can't teach old dogs new tricks. Absolutely nonsense. It's hard to not get brittle, to not get stiff as we age. We need to practice both mental and physical exercise to slow down this process, to remain flexible, while accepting that some things change, some things we can't do. I can't easily get down on the floor, on a cushion for my meditation. And getting down is not nearly as problematic as getting back up. Oh wow, once I'm down there, that looks it's almost like reversing the telescope. What used to bring things closer, now it reversed. That makes flip the telescope the other way. It makes things look farther away. Just as sitting for me, sitting on the floor, is maybe I need help to stand up. So there's inevitable changes as we age, but being flexible, being able to learn, being able to move your body in a gentle way to keep flexibility, so that truly, even though we age physically, we never have to surrender to aging mentally, emotionally, intuitively. And cogitating, meditation, pondering is key to the sustenance, to sustain this beauty of what we are, what we are in the process of becoming, to sustain